Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today because the top priority of this body and the state government at the current time must be to create good jobs for as many families as possible and make Connecticut more affordable. I think to that end, this bill absolutely clearly fails in achieving that goal. That must be the top priority of Connecticut state government, foremost because we face an affordability crisis and because we failed to create jobs in Connecticut over a long period of time and continue to fail to do so today. As we speak, Connecticut has the seventh highest unemployment rate in the country, and since before the pandemic, we have the 8th lowest level of job growth in the continental U.S. That, in large degree, is because of the policies of this state government, which make it inordinately expensive to live here and make it extraordinarily difficult on small businesses and medium-sized businesses to create jobs for workers here. It's, I think, something that the average person in each of our districts pretty commonly understands. It's difficult to create jobs here. It is difficult to afford to live in this state, and it is in a large degree because of the tax and regulatory policies of this state government. But we should also look, as we attempt to achieve a better economy for this state, look to the examples, both the positive and the negative, set by other states. As far as I understand, the state of New York is the best comparable policy comparison to this bill proposed before us today for a, shall we say, highly permissive unemployment benefit arrangement for striking workers. They recently amended it at the end of 2019, or they sent it to the governor at the end of 2019 to permit unemployment benefits to be given to striking employees just a week, I think just 7 days after they initiate a strike. So New York is our best comp to this bill, and it's extraordinarily rare from other states to even have a policy that even begins to consider a policy as is contained in this bill. New York, since the end of 2019 to today, has seen the largest loss in jobs and payrolls of any state in the continental U.S. The only state that trails it is Hawaii. New York is an economic basket case by almost any measure. It's too expensive, the taxes are too high, it's corrupt, it's extraordinarily difficult for small businesses to operate, and so on and so forth. And because of that, they have lost the most jobs of any state in the continental U.S. since around the time that a policy extraordinarily similar to the one before us today was passed into law. So we should ask ourselves, do we want to follow New York on its path to economic malaise and unaffordability? In my part of the state, we welcome residents from New York who are fleeing the economic and otherwise crisis situation that is befalling that state. We welcome them into southwestern Connecticut, and we say, please do not bring the policies of your state with you, although in some cases Connecticut's policies are already somewhat similar to New York's. But New York, by many measures, is the only state with higher taxes than Connecticut, and in some cases the only policies more restrictive to economic growth than Connecticut. So please do not bring the policies of New York to Connecticut, but that's exactly what this bill does. If we pass a policy like this, it creates more stress on an unemployment fund that is already insolvent. That's exactly why a former state senator and the current commissioner of labor in this state has expressed concern about this bill. There is already in excess of $20 million of debt in our unemployment fund. We've already exhausted federal resources in order to cover some of those losses. So the rest of the losses will fall likely on the general fund or on small and medium-sized businesses through their unemployment taxes that they face. They already currently pay in excess of $500 per worker for unemployment taxes, which makes it more difficult for them to pay higher wages to their existing employees or create new jobs for future employees. Now we have a bill before us that will exacerbate the liability, exacerbate the crisis that already exists in our unemployment fund when it's already stressed, creating a liability on existing taxpayers, making it more uncertain for workers who might actually need, in a fair case, to draw upon that unemployment fund. And so from that standpoint, I think a policy like this would be completely unreasonable and irresponsible. So we already have people in the state government on both sides of the aisle sounding the alarm that our unemployment fund is in crisis, it's insolvent, it's creating a risk for our economy and for our workers and for our taxpayers. And so a bill like this should be very, very cautiously considered and approached. So if that current insolvency in our unemployment fund needs to be covered entirely by existing businesses and employers through their unemployment taxes, which of course is ultimately paid by the worker in the form of lower wages and fewer jobs, then if you do the simple math, we would see a 20-25% increase in the amount of unemployment taxes paid per worker through their employer, which will again reduce the number of jobs, reduce long-term wages. If this bill stood any chance of improving things in the long run for workers, for middle-class workers, for working-class workers, for workers in unions, then I would have to think twice about the bill. But I have absolutely zero doubts that this will harm the economic well-being in the long run of our families, of our workers, of the middle class in Connecticut. It will especially make things difficult for people in working class jobs, lower middle income jobs, or people in unions where the presumed risk of this policy will lie in our economy. The Fazios come from a long line of unionized workers, of construction workers going back generations in New York. So if I thought a bill would be destructive to the ends faced by working class, middle class, unionized workers, then it would, I believe, be my responsibility to speak out against it, to oppose it. And I certainly think this bill falls into that category as harming their long-term being. The unemployment insurance program in our state and any other state in the country is an important program that provides resources for people who are temporarily down on their luck. The statute in our state says that the unemployment insurance program is a provision for people experiencing, quote, unemployment through no fault of their own. Unemployment through no fault of their own. It's fair, we have determined as a society and as a state, to provide resources for people who are down in their luck, bad circumstances, layoffs, resignation for cause, etc. This policy would completely flip that paradigm on its head. It would provide unemployment benefits through taxes on the general public for people who voluntarily choose to go off the job. We already have a paradigm where we can bargain, where we can negotiate, where we can achieve higher wages in the long run. This upends the fairness of that relationship. And so, ultimately, it can be expected to destroy jobs and to reduce wages for people in need in the long run. If this were a fair paradigm, if this could even possibly improve the lot of people it's intended to help, then I would have to consider it. But as it is, there is no doubt in my mind that this policy or policies like this will further reduce economic opportunity in Connecticut, will kill more jobs, will reduce long-term wages. And therefore, I urge all of my colleagues to oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.